me show you something worth noticing. There's a difference between being poor and being financially stuck. Most people don't see it. They use the words interchangeably. But the distinction matters more than almost anything else when it comes to money. Being poor is about resources. Being stuck is about pattern. One is a condition. The other is a loop. You can have income and still be stuck. You can make decent money and still feel like you're drowning. That's not poverty. That's something else entirely. I've watched people earn $50,000 a year and feel broke. I've watched people earn $120,000 and feel exactly the same way. The number changes. The feeling doesn't. Because the feeling isn't about the number, it's about the pattern underneath it. Here's what being financially stuck actually looks like. You get paid, you feel a brief moment of relief, then the money disappears. Not all at once, just steadily. You're not reckless, you're not buying ridiculous things, you're just living. And somehow, by the middle of the month, it's gone. So you wait for the next paycheck, and the cycle repeats. Month after month, year after year, that's the loop. And once you're in it, it's hard to see your way out, because it doesn't feel like a pattern, it feels like life. But here's the thing. The loop isn't caused by how much you earn. It's caused by how your mind has learned to relate to money. And that relationship was built long before you ever had a bank account. You learned it as a child, not through lectures, through observation. You watched how the adults around you handled money. You felt the tension when bills came. You noticed what was said and what wasn't. You absorbed the emotional temperature of financial stress. And your brain built a map. That map told you what money means, what it does, what happens when you have it, what happens when you don't, and most importantly, what you're supposed to do when it arrives. If the map says money disappears, then money will disappear. Not because you're careless, because your behavior is unconsciously aligned with what you expect. This is why people stay stuck even when their income rises. They get a raise. They feel optimistic. They think this time will be different. And then 6 months later, they're in the exact same position. Different numbers, same loop, because the map didn't change. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about blame. It's not about discipline or willpower or any of that tired self-help language. This is about recognition. You can't change a pattern you don't see. And most people don't see it because they're too close to it. They think the problem is the amount, so they focus on earning more. And earning more helps, obviously. But if the map doesn't change, the extra money just gets absorbed into the same loop. You upgrade your life. Your expenses rise to match. And the feeling of being stuck comes right back. That's why financial freedom isn't really about the money. It's about the map. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine two people. Both earn $70,000 a year. Same job, same city, same cost of living. One of them feels constantly stressed. Paycheck to paycheck. Never quite enough. The other feels calm. Has savings, doesn't worry about small expenses. What's the difference? It's not the income, it's the internal operating system. One person's map says money is scarce and must be spent before it's gone. The other person's map says money is manageable and can be directed. Same external conditions, completely different emotional reality. And here's the part that matters. The person who feels calm didn't get there by luck. They got there because at some point they updated the map. Maybe they had a mentor Maybe they hit a breaking point. Maybe they just started paying attention, but something shifted, and once it did, everything else followed. The loop broke, not because they earned more, because they thought differently. So if you're stuck, the first thing to do is stop blaming the amount. The amount is part of the equation, but it's not the equation. The real question is, what does money mean to you? Not intellectually, emotionally. When money comes in, what do you feel? Relief? Anxiety? Guilt? Permission? The answer will tell you what your map says. If money feels like relief, your map probably says money is temporary. So you spend it while it's there, because deep down, you don't believe it'll last. If money feels like anxiety, your map probably says money is dangerous, so you avoid looking at it. You don't track it. You don't plan, because engaging with it feels overwhelming. If money feels like guilt, your map probably says having money is selfish, so you give it away. You overspend on others. You sabotage your own stability because holding on to money feels wrong. None of this is conscious. That's why it's so hard to change. You're not deciding to stay stuck. You're just following the map. But once you see the map, you can start to redraw it. And that process isn't about earning more. It's about pausing. It's about noticing. It's about asking yourself why you do what you do with money, why you spend when you do, why you avoid when you do, why you feel what you feel. Most people never ask those questions. They just react. And the reactions keep them in the loop. Here's what redrawing the map actually looks like. It starts small. You notice a moment where you're about to spend money. And instead of just doing it, you pause. You ask yourself, do I actually want this? Or am I just responding to a feeling? That pause is everything, because in that pause, you're stepping outside the map. You're creating space between the trigger and the reaction, and in that space, choice becomes possible. Over time, those pauses add up. You start to see the pattern. You start to see where the money actually goes, not in theory, in reality. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's when things shift. Not because you suddenly have more money, because you finally have awareness. And awareness is the only thing that breaks the loop. Now, let's talk about what keeps people stuck even after they start to see the pattern. Because awareness alone isn't enough. You also need a new reference point. Most people who are financially stuck are surrounded by other people who are financially stuck. That's not judgment. That's just reality. And when everyone around you is in the same loop, the loop feels normal. It feels like the only option. So even when you start to see it, you don't fully believe there's another way, because you've never seen another way up close. You've heard about it, you've read about it, but you haven't lived near it. And that matters, because your brain learns through proximity. If everyone you know is stressed about money, stress becomes your baseline. If everyone you know spends everything they earn, spending becomes the norm. Breaking out of that requires exposure to a different baseline. It doesn't mean abandoning your people. It means finding at least one person who thinks about money differently. Someone who saves without deprivation. Someone who spends with intention. Someone who isn't in the loop. You don't need a whole new social circle. You just need one model, one reference point that shows you it's possible. Because once you see it's possible, your brain starts looking for ways to make it possible for you. Here's the other thing that keeps people stuck. They conflate being stuck with being poor. And because they think they're poor, they think the only solution is more money. So they work harder, they take on extra shifts, they hustle, and they burn out. Because the hustle doesn't address the map. It just adds more money to a system that's designed to drain it. I'm not saying don't work hard. I'm saying don't confuse effort with strategy. Effort without awareness just deepens the loop. You work more, you earn more, you spend more, and the feeling stays the same. Real change happens when you stop trying to earn your way out and start thinking your way out. When you realize that the problem isn't the income, it's the operating system. And updating the operating system doesn't require more money. It requires different decisions, small ones, repeated ones, decisions that feel uncomfortable at first because they go against the map, like keeping money instead of spending it, like tracking where it goes instead of avoiding the numbers, like saying no to things you used to say yes to, not because you can't afford them, because you're choosing something else. Those decisions feel strange because the map says they're wrong. The map says money is for spending. The map says saving is for other people. The map says you'll never have enough, so why bother trying? But every time you make a decision that contradicts the map, you weaken it. And every time you weaken it, you create space for a new map. One that says money is manageable. One that says stability is possible. One that says you're not stuck. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in moments, small moments that don't feel significant at the time, but those moments compound. And over time, they change everything. That's the real difference between being poor and being stuck. Being poor is about external conditions. Being stuck is about internal conditions. And internal conditions can change. Not easily, not quickly, but consistently. One decision at a time. One pause at a time. One small contradiction of the old map at a time. And eventually, you look up, and the loop is gone. Not because you earned more, because you thought differently. And once you think differently, the money follows. Because money doesn't fix a broken map, but a better map absolutely changes what you do with money. So if you're stuck, stop focusing on the income, start focusing on the map. Ask yourself what money means to you. Ask yourself what you learned about it. Ask yourself what you're afraid will happen if you change. And then change anyway. Not all at once, just a little, just enough to prove to yourself that the loop isn't inevitable, that you're not trapped, that the pattern can shift, because it can. And once it does, everything else starts to shift with it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.